I'm Gale Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I'm really honored to be part of Represent NYC. We do these shows often. They're always really special at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, also known as MNN. And I'm really honored today to talk about workers. These are the workers who do deliveries, but they're also the essential workers. I can't tell you how many of them helped us survive the pandemic. Thousands. They're gig workers. And as you'll hear from these two amazing guests, they face a particular set of problems. And the large corporations for which they work are not regulated in any way. So here to discuss this really important topic about this industry and these amazing workers are two guests. Maria Figueroa, who is the Dean of the Harry Van Arsdale School of Labor Studies at Empire State College at SUNY, and who has done incredible work on this topic. She has had a large number, I think it was 500 in terms of a study, and she'll talk more about the challenges that these workers face. And then our second guest is Hildalyn Colón. She's with the Workers' Justice Project. And I know her because for seems like 2 years or maybe a year, we sat in the conference room at 1 Center Street where our office is and talked about the real challenges and the tragedy of construction workers who die. And she was in the district attorney's office in Manhattan, and her contribution was phenomenal. So you have here two amazing guests talking about a topic that I think everybody knows a little about, but not as much. So I want to start with you, Professor Figueroa, because I know you've done some research, and I guess talk about anything you want, but some of your preliminary findings and what you think should be done to be of support to these amazing individuals. And thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much for having me and Hildalyn. And actually, I will start by saying that my study, my research is part of a partnership with Workers' Justice Project. So this is actually, what I'm going to talk about are actually the results of a participatory action research project. So yeah, what we found is very concerning. We found that these workers who, as you said, were deemed essential during the pandemic are facing severe challenges. And those challenges include issues of pay and most importantly, issues of basic workplace safety. And so in terms of the pay, what we found, and these are preliminary estimates, it's true. And we're not including tips in this because we consider that tips are a very volatile form of income. So therefore what we arrived at is the estimate that per hour, these workers are making $6.57. And that would be the minimum rate, the minimum of the range, and the maximum $7.87. That is net of expenses. That's why it sounds very low, because it is very low. This is, this is a net pay. As you also know, these workers are considered independent contractors, right? It's not that they go and work for a regular employer who will provide all the supplies, the tools they need to conduct or, engage in their work, right? Or perform their work. No, they have to supply everything, including their e-bikes, which are very expensive, in the range of $2,000 and up, and also the batteries and everything else, the maintenance of the equipment they use, everything. So after that, this is what the workers make. The other issue too is that they are facing non-payment, outright non-payment of their base pay for the worth of 1 week or 2 weeks, of work. And that is also outrageous, considering that these workers are already, in precarious economic conditions. Most of them lost their jobs in restaurants or in the construction industry during the pandemic. And let's consider the workplace safety issues that I'm sure Hildalyn is gonna expand more on, but those are very severe as well. You know, starting from the most basic needs that these workers experience and that remain unmet, you know, including the access to bathrooms. They are not allowed to use bathrooms in the restaurants in which they pick up their orders. And this started since the pandemic, but it was an issue that actually pre-existed, right? Or that preceded the pandemic. So actually around 83% of the workers we surveyed said that they were not allowed to use the bathrooms. So that's one issue, and you can have serious repercussions in their health. This is actually already, there is evidence for this. And the other issue is accidents. They are exposed to risk of accidents on the road, and they are not covered by health care plans. So we found that 49%, about half of all the workers who participated in our survey said that they had an accident while they were doing a delivery. And of these, 75% said that they had to pay for their healthcare expenses out of their own pocket. So again, that is a consequence of the fact that they are classified as independent contractors and are not employees. Probably the most serious danger that delivery workers confront in this occupation is the risk of becoming victims of violent assault when their electric bikes are stolen. And this is a widespread issue, which also worsened during the pandemic. We found that 54% of the workers we surveyed had experienced bike theft. And of these 54%, 30% of them said that they were physically assaulted during the robbery. And these workers actually live in that world because they are not protected by existing, labor and employment laws.
It's phenomenal. And also, Professor, I'm embarrassed. I said that you were at Empire State, but you're also at Cornell ILR. Are you at both, or is it Cornell?
I'm former director, of labor and policy research. Yeah.
Okay, no wonder you're so fabulous. No wonder you're so fabulous. It's an amazing history, and perhaps nobody else has this kind of academic study. So congratulations. And so,
thank you,
my friend, Hildalyn, so I would love to hear from you. Obviously, you and I are trying to find a hub on the Upper West Side. I'm not going to forget this, because it's not only all these issues that were just described, but you also need a charging station, you need a bathroom, and then all the other issues that you're going to talk about. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today. So go ahead with, I think this information that is academic is helpful to you.
Right. So one of the things that when we started organizing these workers is like, we need an X-ray, like a basic X-ray of who these workers are, what do they congregate, how much is their pay. And I think Maria pointed out very kind of like, well, and when you started, all these workers work for apps-based companies, right? Uber, DoorDash, that many of the people that are probably watching these restaurants are customers, right? They use these apps. And they came to the city. They was helpful in the pandemic, but we have never, as a New York City, established a relation on how the apps are going to relate with the city and how the apps are going to relate with the workers. And this is one of the things that we're trying to kind of like to work. So Maria gave us a great sense about what are the issues that they're dealing with, and then how our organization, Los Deliveristas, have been in partnership with the city council and with you to address and find solutions to some of these issues, right? Because we want New York City a place to be the race to the top, not to the race to the bottom, right? And that's something that I think all of New Yorkers are very proud of. And one of the things that Maria discovered is the issue about bathrooms, lack of transparency in their payments. We New Yorkers like to tip well, but part of the process that we're trying to make sure, and part of the legislation that we're kind of like working on and is under consideration of the city council, is that the workers know, I as a customer want to know when my tip went, right? And I want to know when I gave that tip to the worker, not to the app, not to the company, not to the restaurant, right? And that's some of the things that we're trying to address. The issue of bathroom in 2021 is still embarrassing, I think, to talk about, but that's something that is really concerning, very basic stuff that we're looking. Another issue is a big issue is about distance. A lot of the customers, when you order, you're like, well, why are they taking so long? Some of these workers, and Maria can tell you, travel, you can be in Canal Street and they send you to make a delivery all the way in Inwood. So that's easily an hour and 45 minutes. And these workers are rushing, right? Because what makes the difference, and Maria, based on the numbers, what makes the difference in that tip that can be so essential for them. So that's why you see them kind of like rushing from one place to another to make sure that they get there on time, because also the app says you have to get there in a certain amount of time, right? And sometimes as a customer, sometimes they don't know where do they travel. They're not traveling from your corner, right? These workers are traveling. Sometimes they're coming from Queens to deliver something in Manhattan. I know during the research, Maria had an incident that there was a worker that was working in Manhattan and traveled all the way to New Jersey to deliver actually a coffee and a bagel. And she can tell you so many stories about this. And so that is some of the challenges that we're establishing. And I think that is some of the, as Los Deliveristas, we're organizing these workers, we're giving them a voice, and we give them in ways of how to kind of like bring solutions to the table, right? They're not saying we only have issues, but they only have very good solutions. The legislation that the New York City Council is considering is actually their own ideas about how to address some of the situations that they have. And I will tell you, and Maria can tell you because she haven't met with them, like no focus group. They're very organized. They want to be participating. They care about their work. They feel very proud of what they do. They're very well known in the communities, right? They care about the communities that they serve. A lot of them actually live in Queens and Bronx, Brooklyn, and they travel to Manhattan because that's what the main place is of their work. So I think during the pandemic, and as we get out of it, right, we didn't know a lot of the circumstances, and part of this process too is kind of like bringing this information to the community and see how they can be helpful and kind of like be able to ask them questions.
I think there's two things. One is, of course, has any of the city council legislation passed? I know I should know that. That's helpful, and what's pending. And then also what customers should be doing in terms of being supported. We obviously know about the tips, but I didn't know if there was, so those are my two questions. And then I have more, but customer, what should they be doing and what is happening at the council?
So the city council right now has 6 bills. They're part of a package goals for bring justice to Los Deliveristas, which is kind of like trying to address the issue of bathroom, distance, lack of transparency, a minimum pay that is livable, because I think Maria really explained that nobody can live in New York City with $6.50 an hour. And so right now, this is under the consideration of the city council, went to a hearing. It's supposed to go to a vote in August 26th. So we want to make sure that bill's passed. So customers have, like, our residents, please call your city council and encourage them from your area to vote yes for this bills. We need every vote that we can count. We're actually, as all of us may know, the apps are not probably very happy that they're being regulated, right? Because they have been able to operate in an environment that benefit them with zero accountability. So these bills will start kind of like bringing some accountability to the apps. And then the other part for how the customers can kind of like can help is, if you can tip in cash, that's something that the worker will know that they get it. If you do, and I know a lot of us don't carry cash, right? Like we have ATMs everywhere. It's a good time when they give the food, if you have the opportunity, ask them, hey, I gave you this tip, do you got it? And a lot of the workers will be very appreciative, because what they're gonna do is they're gonna open their app and they're gonna say, hey, the app gave me $2, so this is what you kind of like give me. And a lot of the times, and Maria can tell you, we have found that workers find that the customer says, I gave you $5, but my app is telling me they only give me $2. So part of the issue that we want to know where the $3 went, right? Because as I said, people tip with the assumption that it's going to the worker, not to the app, not to the restaurant.
I'm so old fashioned. You're not gonna believe it. I still do checks. I hate to tell you.
I do
I pay
checks
my
too.
bills. I'm bad. I always have cash, always. I have a credit card, but I always have cash. And then I don't use the apps. I call the store directly. I'm very neurotic. And I always tip in cash. So I'm not good at the modern society in that way, but the rest of the world is. So Maria, most of the persons you interviewed, I assume were working for the apps and not directly for the restaurants. So that's where the challenge is, because it's like a whole new world, right? In terms of, so how do you, I mean, are these some of the solutions, either the city council, are there other solutions that we should be looking for? Because this is hard. These apps are huge, national, international, I assume. So you're taking on, you know, it's David and Goliath a little bit in terms of the support. So I was just wondering, you know, your research is so phenomenal. Do you feel the city council bills will address it, or what else should we be doing?
Yeah, it is. You're totally correct, Gail. This is a David against Goliath fight that we are waging, or that these workers are waging. You probably heard about the issues in California, where workers and the communities were able to get the AB5 law, for which Uber and Lyft got an exemption from, and DoorDash, right? And all the apps. So yeah, they are very powerful. They have, they invest a lot in lobbying and influencing policy across the nation and also across the world. Yeah, we feel actually that the local level policy is a good start and a good model. We're actually replicating what Uber and Lyft drivers did to achieve their own improvements in terms of pay. As you may remember, in 2018, Uber and Lyft drivers got the minimum pay ordinance here in the city. They were a little bit luckier than the delivery workers because they were already regulated, you know, by the TLC. Yeah, exactly. So we are definitely at a disadvantage in this industry, you know, in the food delivery industry that, you know, that involves the platforms. They do, you know, call themselves technology companies, right? They don't call themselves transportation companies or delivery companies. And so they claim that they only match consumers with delivery workers or restaurants, right? And so it is a tricky new environment, right? For advocates, for worker advocates to come up with policy solutions that can address these challenges. But again, in all this process and speaking with the workers and other, you know, stakeholders, we think that what the city council is considering at this point in terms of the 6 bills that were introduced might be a very good start. And, you know, at one point, we may have to look into what the state can do in order to gain other types of protections. But that again is a long winding road that at this point, you know, given the pressures and the urgency of the issues that the workers are facing, we cannot afford to take, you know, we cannot afford to take an approach like that.
My question, you know, these apps, obviously Grubhub, Uber Eats, Seamless, DoorDash, Caviar, you know, others, I'm sure. Do they all operate in the same way? Do they have different nuances? Do the workers work for different ones? Are there some better than others, or are they all similarly, I would use the word challenging?
So all of them are challenges. I think some of them might do something good. Some of them might do something disadvantaged. Remember also, they're fighting for themselves, right? They want to surpass the other. So right now, Uber want to make sure to be the dominant app. This is a new industry, which I think Maria pointed out, which is really good. This would require a whole infrastructure redesign from how the city approach everything, right? Like what you mentioned about, even now we have 50,000 workers probably in the street with electric bikes with no charging location. So it's gonna be a whole redesigning of how we do this. In terms of the apps, one of the things that we challenge too is like new apps are forming every day. So we don't know who they are, right? And part of the city, one of the bills that is not from us, but the restaurants are bringing to the table, which I think it's a good, they need to register with the city. We need to register who these apps are. Let's start with that. And I think in terms of the apps, they have their nuance, but the issues, Maria can tell you based on the research that she did, the issues are the same across the board. Issues with lack of transparency, poor pay, for example, distances, the ways that they establish, there's sometimes no logic in terms of how do they do the distances. And we have said this across the board, right? The apps are doing a race to the bottom, not a race to the top. And I want to add, these workers are working 12 hours a day. They start extremely early in the morning. They go through the rush of the breakfast. They take a little bit of a break and they come back to the lunch break and they finish sometimes at midnight, 11 o'clock at night, which is kind of like bring back the issue that I think Maria raised about their safety and the security, right? There are these sometimes late at night, they're the only ones out on the street making these deliveries, but they're easy prey for the people to steal and assault them. We've seen an increase in assault of delivery workers across the board. Actually, yesterday, the NYPD released 2 videos about 2 deliveries that were assaulted. Not only their bikes, their motorcycles too. And that is a big problem. And then the other part that I will raise is that a lot of the bridges that they use to cross, for example, the Willis Bridge is one of the biggest problems. They don't have lighting, basic lighting that is not exist in the bridges. They don't have cameras to kind of like address if the workers get assaulted on the bridge. So we don't have even the infrastructure in the city to address, even to help to resolve some of these crimes. We are in the partnership with the NYPD, kind of like working some of these cases, but in the Willis Bridge, that's the biggest challenge, right? And when this assault happened, as Maria raised, they're becoming more violent. They take their phones away, they take their bikes away, sometimes even physically they're injured. So it's very hard. And then the people that are taking their bikes move very fast. So we don't have like a quick account of what happened. It's very hard sometimes for NYPD to address this. And also we need NYPD and the people to see the seriousness of this, because sometimes people are like, oh, it's just a bike. Yeah, but it's their livelihood. It's like with this bikes, these workers cannot work. And they spend a lot of money in trying to buy this tool and to keep it functioning so they can do their work. Because if you don't have a bike, it's impossible that you do these deliveries in the amount of a serious amount that they can gain a decent amount of money to take back to sustain their families. And many of these workers, they will tell you they have families, they have kids, they have rents, right? They have things. And for example, one of the biggest issues that Maria raised, if some of them get assaulted or in an accident, they don't have unemployment, they don't have insurance, they don't have workers' comp. They have to be figured out how do they get better. Some of these workers, they even spend 2 days, they even go hurt, like you see them with they're hurt, they're working because they don't have no other choice.
I mean, I think the other thing to tell customers is, because customers, New Yorkers complain when people don't stop for the rules of the road. And I think the way to say that is support the city council bills, so that then you could, as an employee, get the deserved worker protections and salary that would enable you to have the funding to be able to deliver in a safe way. And I think that would be another way to approach, because I know my constituents and they are complainers, all of Manhattan. I would say that the research that you've done though, Maria, is so important. And do you think that are other cities or other parts of the country thinking along these same lines? Or are we kind of nobody's ahead of the game because these workers are treated so in such a challenging manner. But is this kind of discussion going on in other places in the country?
It's starting to happen for the delivery workers in Philadelphia, but it's you see, New York City is unique in many ways. You know, this workforce here is the only one that rides bikes, you know, to deliver. The setting here is unique in that sense. Philadelphia itself, you know, which does have an urban center, you know, of significant size, still has more of a combination of workers that use their cars and bikes, right? So our market is unique, and you know, some of the solutions that we're advancing are sort of specific, right, to the needs that these workers have. But in terms of the model of creating or establishing protections for gig workers, for so-called gig workers, and in food delivery, I would say we're breaking new grounds, right? Because of all these factors, that this is a unique workforce, and also the fact that it's the first time that local level policy is gonna be established to protect food delivery workers that are app-based. The only existing local level policy to protect gig workers now in New York and Seattle are for rideshare workers, for the Uber and Lyft workers. So yes, I think in many ways we're breaking new grounds. New York City, which is, you know, it's not unusual on the part of New York, right, to innovate. And we are hopeful that, yes, others will replicate our model, you know, with the modifications they need.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but I want to thank Professor Maria Figueroa. I want to thank Hildalyn Colón. I want to thank all the workers who are not here today, but for their unbelievable essential work. I want you to know, as the borough president, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram on all 3 platforms. I'm Gale A. Brewer. And if you want to stay up on what's going on in Manhattan, including all the issues regarding COVID, please sign up for our weekly newsletter at manhattanbp.nyc.gov/subscribe. This has been a phenomenal discussion, an incredibly important topic, and it's Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Networks. Thank you both very much. And I promise you, I'm working on a place for charging and bathroom on the Upper West Side. Thank you both very much.